All right. Are we live?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. I don't see it on my Instagram. Oh, there it is. There it is. I see it. I see it. I'm going to like myself. Heart. I deserve it. Okay. All right. We're going live for the very, very first time. And I hope to be able to continue to do this every single week. Now, the schedule of our live session is we're going to talk about the key issue of the success story. And we're going to talk a lot more about the context of it, because in the success story, I really want to focus on the hero of the story, the clients and their journey and how they overcome it. We touch upon a little bit about the law, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. But in the live session, we could talk a lot more about the context of it. And we could talk about current trends and news regarding this particular issue. Things that you will never find anywhere else. Like, for example, today's news, you're not going to see this anywhere else, right? And so we talk about the key issue. And today's issue really is about the lawful permanent resident, what happens when they're overseas for an extended amount of time. A lot of people don't know that. That's a big problem. So we're going to talk about the issue. We're going to talk about current news and law and events that surrounds that. Then we're going to get into a live filming of the success story. So this whole thing is live, but we're also making a success story video. You've seen some of these success story videos on our YouTube channel. We've been doing it, for a couple years now. We have almost 1,000 of them. But we're going to just live record the success story, and then we're going to edit it, make it a little bit better. And then afterwards, I can actually take questions and answers from anybody who's interested on this topic. Generally, you could ask any other questions that relates to immigration as well. I'll be here, I'll answer that, and then we close it out. So every week, I'm going to try to do a live session talking about the success story that we're filming that day. And we're going to be here to answer your questions. So feel free to tune in any single time. Really happy to do this. I'm really excited. This is the New Year resolution for 2025, where we're doing these live sessions. So let's get to it. Okay. So for tonight's story, we're covering over the issue of green card holders who are overseas for more than 1 year. That's the law. If you're overseas for 1 year, it is presumed that you could have abandoned your green card. Now, why is that? Why does the United States have this kind of a policy? There could be many reasons. So first, understand a little bit, what is a lawful permanent resident? You're not a citizen. You're not like a random alien who just have a work visas or you're here illegally. You're a lawful permanent resident. So you have certain rights and privileges, but you're not a full-on United States citizen. Think of it as a hybrid. One of the conditions, one of the responsibilities and duties placed upon this hybrid situation, lawful permanent resident, is you're supposed to be living here in the United States, technically working, paying taxes, etc. United States is a consumer economic force, right? 70% of our GDP depends on consumer spending. Well, if you're not here, it's kind of hard to spend on healthcare insurance, on cars, on property, on food, right? So that's potentially one reason why Congress made it a law, so that when you have a lawful permanent resident, you're supposed to be here in the United States. And if you're overseas for over 1 year, you have presumed to have abandoned it. Now, of course, there's exceptions, right, to every good law. There's humanitarian reasons. You could apply for a reentry permit. However, there are many, many people who live overseas and they get in trouble. And so today's story really is about this 9-year-old boy who's been out for 10 years and how we got them back and how we got him back and saved the day and kept his green card, right? So, but we'll get into that story a little bit later, but that's kind of like the overall big context of it. There's a second reason regarding why the United States has this bizarre rule, but you know what? It's not just the United States. Every country has similar rules about trying to keep their people in their country, even if their economy is not dependent on on consumerism, right? So in the U.S. we pay taxes on the things we spend. We pay taxes in a lot of states on the income that we make, but generally other countries might not depend on that. Yet they still have that requirement. Why? Because of national security. If you are overseas for 1 year, God knows what kind of military spy espionage training that you could have undergone. And now if you come back into the country, you could, harm the United States severely. So under national security policies, it makes sense. All right, so just put it out there. It's not some bizarre rule that the United States implements on people, right? Now, this really only applies to lawful permanent residents. If you're a U.S. citizen and you're overseas, there's very little that the CBP customs officer can do when you're entering, right? But so this is specifically for people who have green cards, who live overseas, who travel overseas, or who have a reason to be abroad for more than 1 year. When you're coming back, what kind of issues you will face, right? So that's the law and principle. Now, let's talk about some current news. All right, this you will not see anywhere. Nobody's talking about it. And this is the fact that a lot of these government agencies, these customs CBP agencies at every single port of entry, they are canceling their meetings with their private sector counterpart, us, the Bar Association. So what am I talking about? Over the years, the government agencies, whether you're talking about customs, whether you're talking about USCIS, United States Immigration Services, or ICE, or any immigration enforcement agency, they have private meetings with the private bar, the attorneys, the lawmakers, the people who are dealing with clients, and they have a meeting every quarter, every half a year, some on a monthly basis, and they talk about things, right? So this is a very sacred and very important moment. Why? Because government employees, government agencies, they don't necessarily have all the training to deal with every single issue. And so the private bar kind of comes in and supplements that, right? Did you know that as a customs officer, you go through maybe about 2-week training and you're supposed to learn everything about immigration law? I've been an immigration lawyer for over 10 years. I'm a certified immigration law specialist under a state bar, and I still don't know everything about immigration law. They are supposed to learn it in 2 weeks without a law degree? Impossible, right? And it constantly changes. So you have a 2-week training like years ago. How do you know what the newest CSPA policy is? Impossible, right? And so my point is, government agencies, they have these monthly, quarterly meetings with a private bar to talk about every issue under the sun that they're dealing with. What are some of the mistakes that CBP is making? How can the private bar help? What are some internal policies that you guys want to let the public know? You guys don't have, I mean, they don't have like a, you can't just put it on the website sometimes, right? So they rely on the private bar to train them, to discuss, and a lot of times private bar have private issues that there's like, hey, there's this thing that happened. Instead of being sued, can we just resolve it here and there, right? And then, so these private meetings all across the United States, we're seeing them canceled/postponed. If it's just a matter of postponing one agency by pushing it back by a few months, that happens all the time. But what we're seeing is different. We're seeing USCIS, we're seeing CBP, we're seeing ICE, we're seeing different agencies who are supposed to meet with the private bar within a few months. A lot of them are saying, sorry, cancel, postpone, or postpone indefinitely. This is a huge shock, right? Few years ago, CBP Customs and the private bar got into a big fight over some issue, and there was a lawsuit that happened, and so they canceled all meetings. That's understandable because that's the private bar suing CBP, and obviously they're pissed off and say, okay, under, because we're in a lawsuit, we're not going to meet with you. It's kind of giving us a cold shoulder, ghosting us. But that's fair. That's a lawsuit, and that's specific to that one agency. What I'm reporting right now is that it's multiple agencies, USCIS, CBP, ICE, generally across the board, or a lot of them are postponing or canceling these meetings indefinitely. But not all. There's no direct executive order or Congress or congressional order saying the government can no longer meet with the private bar, so cancel everything. I'm just saying there's a huge amount of cancellations. I actually have some here right now, right? So, I know the San Francisco private bar still had a meeting with CBP. I know the AILA National Conference is still having a meeting with the private bar in April. But the LAX, San Diego, a lot of them are postponed, and we're not sure when it will resume. So that's really, really important, right? Because if this communication is severed, then that's going to be really annoying for both parties and clients as well, because so much of law is done on the individual level, right? So Congress makes a law, USCIS implements it, CBP as a national implements it, but every jurisdiction has their own directors that implements their own policies and adjudicates things in their own way. They deal with different issues. The San Diego, the Mexican border CBP officers deal with completely different issues than the Canadian border. And then like Las Vegas deals with different problems than the land borders compared to New York, compared to California, right? So it makes sense that each region has their own jurisdiction, has their own specialization, and so they have their own policies that is not available. It's not a law that is in place. It's just what they decide. But they're essentially making their own laws and for good reason, because they're adjusting to what's happening there, right? That's more efficient that way. But if this communication is severed, then the private bar no longer knows what's going on. Then it becomes chaos, right? It's definitely much more chaotic. But luckily, these meetings have been going on for decades. And so even though, for budgetary reasons, if government officials cannot meet with the private bar, with private attorneys, and having these meetings, the relationships are still there. And so thank goodness we have been still keeping in touch with all of these officers and past officers that still work there. And it's like, hey, this thing is going on. We no longer have a meeting, but I want to check on this policy. Do we still need to bring original documents here? You know, are these type of seeds still banned, right, or something like that, right? So it's really important to go to these meetings when you get an opportunity. I'm now speaking to immigration lawyers, right? When you get these opportunities, don't take it for granted, right? I know many people take it for granted, like, oh, AILA, LACBA, CBP, all these government agencies, they're constantly having these meetings. There's too many. I can't go. I don't want to go. I'm too busy. And you don't go. But now, maybe these meetings will never happen again, or not happen for the next few years. That's a shame that you could have gone in the past, right? And now you lost that opportunity. So definitely take advantage of the opportunity when the government officials are willing to meet with you. Now, of course, it's not, I mean, like I said, Washington, D.C., the spring conference for AILA, you can still meet the CBP officers. They're still willing to go at the national level to speak with you. So you could go to that conference. AILA National in June in Colorado, probably be able to go speak with them, understand exactly what the policies are. But that's the news that I'm sharing today, right? Agencies are undergoing some sort of transformation. Maybe it's budgetary constraints, but we don't know exactly what's happening, and we will keep an eye out. And if there's anything that's come up, we'll share that with you.
How do you see that affecting clients?
Oh yeah, so a lot of times, right? Let's take for example in COVID, right? 2020. The law of the land is if you are out of the country for over 1 year, your green card could be confiscated. You could get an NTA, notice of intent to appear, go to immigration court. A slew of things could happen to you and lose your green card. But in 2020, before the AILA before national CBP made any directives, individual ports of entry, they all made their own decision on what to do. Because of these meetings, we're able to find out exactly, okay, in 2020, there is going to be a leeway. And then in 2021, there was still a plan where airports abroad, they can still fly people in, even if green card is expired, even if they're, provided that it's a 10-year green card, et cetera, conditions. But these local chapters are able to inform the private bar, and we're able to release the information to the public. So I mean, I guess it could be solved if CBP at every local office, at every director has a nice Twitter account that could just release information. But again, they don't, right? And government agencies, they're very protective over their policies, which all makes sense, right? If Chicago and LAX is releasing completely different situations, that won't look good on the government. But the reality is they have to adjudicate accordingly. So how does that affect clients? Well, if a client has a very specific situation in the past, we will be able to take it to these meetings and talk to the officers. If this opportunity is no longer available, then in the future, tricky situations, well, what are we going to do? Right? Do we just have to play it out? That kind of sucks because it's uncertainty on all around, right? It wastes the government's time, it wastes our time, it wastes the client's time, and lives are at stake. So that's really the big downside that we're talking about. How long was that? That was 15 minutes. All right, so that was the first two parts. We talked about the issue. We talked about the current news regarding LPR entries, lawful permanent residents trying to enter the country again after they've been out for over a year. And then right after this sip of Lipton tea, please sponsor us. Your tea bags are not that expensive. You totally could sponsor us. Come on. Okay. I really drink Lipton tea not for the caffeine, because really there's not a lot of caffeine. It's just for the taste, something like that. All right. Okay, ready? We're going to do a live recording of a success story. We've never done this before. In the past, I get to mess up all I want, and the geniuses behind the camera, Galen, Olivia, Catherine, Gunn, can come do their magic and piece it together. But now, on a live recording, I cannot, so I just have to shoot through the entire story. We'll see if I'm good enough, right? Let's go. Okay. So, I already messed up. Okay, let's try again. Another tea. Okay, I can do this.
You're able to get through like 15 minutes of news, but then once you get into the story,
yeah.
Habits.
Yeah. I sort of messed myself up, right? I said myself like, I cannot fail, and then I immediately failed. All right, that's pretty funny. Okay. Hi, my name is Joseph, and today's story is about a 9-year-old boy who's left the U.S. for 10 years and now wants to come back. How? Because the law is that if you've been outside of the country for more than 1 year, your green card is presumed abandoned. You're supposed to prove that you've maintained residence in the U.S., that the U.S. is your home, you have no intent of abandoning it, that the trip abroad is temporary in nature. But how do you explain away 10 years of absence? All your developmental years are outside of the country. How do you prove that? Why did a CBP officer end up approving this kid to come in? Exactly what happened? How did it go down? I'm going to share this story with you. It's so cool. Let's go. So that's when we insert the logo, and then now it comes back to me, and I'm going to start again. Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm the managing partner here at Tsang and Associates, where we solve legal problems with creative solutions. So the legal problem, again, is that this 9-year-old boy who is 19 years old now and taller than me totally could be a spy against the United States, totally could be so many things that the U.S. wants to deny. How are they able to come in? What happened? What do they do? Well, the truth is they actually already thought their green card was gone. Long time ago. They only recently found out that it's not. Why? Because the kid got into NYU, all right? This bright scholar got into NYU, went to the consulate to get an F1 international student visa. And the consular officer told them, we cannot issue you this visa because you're still a green card holder. You need to formally abandon the green card before getting this I-20. This happened like in April-ish, right? It's like, what? My green card's still valid? I was 9 years old when I got it. You need me to formally abandon my green card in order to issue me an I-20, a student visa? That's crazy. Then the brother, who's in the United States, was like, what? Let me research. Looked everywhere, found a few of our videos on YouTube, and then said, there might be a chance that we can still save you because Joseph and his team got somebody in the country who's been outside for more than 13 years. If you've been out for 10 years, maybe there's hope. So we jumped on a call, we analyzed the situation, and they decided to try. Now, it's not an easy case, right? If you've been outside of the country for 1 year, for 2 years, 4 years, given COVID, you have really good explanation, maybe you could come up with an explanation. But this kid was out for 10 years, right? And here's another thing. He got his green card through family, right? Because his mom got the green card. But guess what? The mom already abandoned the green card, already lost the green card. So now as a dependent, don't you kind of lose it too? Doesn't that kind of make sense? Well, in this case, the mom is really out of the country. The whole family thought they abandoned the green card. They didn't even think about it because, in fact, there's no actual formal procedure to really force you to abandon your green card, right? If you leave, if you just don't renew your green card, you're technically still a lawful permanent resident. The United States could technically go technically go and audit you and make you pay all these back taxes if you owe the country. But nobody really actually does that. And maybe that's why Trump is trying to create an external revenue service to cut down all these green card holders overseas with unpaid taxes. But there's no formal procedure that automatically terminates your green card until you reactivate it, right? It's not like a subscription process. Now, that's why the consulate is saying, please go formally abandon your green card, return your status to a foreign alien, and then we can adjudicate you and then grant your visa. Which means, now they found out, we know this, even if your green card is expired, even if you left the country for a significant amount of time, you're technically still a lawful permanent resident up until a judge cancels you or up until you formally abandon it. Even if the consulate denies your SB1 visa as a returning alien, it does not mean you lose your green card status. It just means they're not willing to issue you the ticket to get back into the U.S. But you are fundamentally still a lawful permanent resident. I know it's super confusing. But there's good reason why the United States does this. But lucky for this kid, who's 19 now, who got into NYU, they wanted to try, right? And here's the reason why I sort of encouraged them to do it. So first, he went to an elite school in Hong Kong, fluent in English, is a scholar, got into NYU, obviously, I've said that like 5 times now, a great school. He's tall, handsome, fit, basically what the United States want, right?
Yeah, do you think being handsome is?
I do think so. I've talked with a lot of consular officers and I talked with a lot of CBS for marriage cases, for visas. There is that underlying subconscious where they want good-looking people to come into the country, okay? It improves the gene pool, right? Like that's some of the low-key things that people have told me about. But given the background, right, this person is going to graduate and is going to work and pay taxes. Think about all the tax money that the United States saved. They don't have to, he didn't go to elementary school, junior high, high school. He didn't have to know insurance. Basically, cost the United States $0 to raise this kid. But he's going to be a super influential, smart, capable individual. And then coming into the country, finish his college education, and then be able to produce economic output for the next 40, 60, 80 years. That's a great deal. Now, that's not something that CBP officers necessarily understand directly. They're not responsible for the GDP of the United States. But that is like a low-key argument, again, that we make, right? Well, the actual argument we made was that he never abandoned his United States. Because you have to stick with the actual arguments. What do I mean by that? Your responsibility is to prove you did not abandon the U.S. and that your reason abroad was temporary. So you have to stick with those 2 prongs and then argue everything underneath it. Now, the things that I mentioned, how it benefits the U.S., that's like a sub-tangential argument. But the main thing is that he never abandoned his American heritage. He studied international school. He's a bright kid. He studied English. He's fluent. He's smart. He got into these great universities. He can converse. He can talk to the officer. So that was basically his background. Another thing we used was that the actions of the parents cannot and should not be impugned upon the child, right? I know other countries, other laws make the sins of the father pass to their children, and that sucks, right? So in America, we're very, very individualistic, and so there's actually immigration precedent and law that says, if you're underage, you're sort of protected from these unlawful presence. So we use that argument. 18 years old, graduated high school, got his acceptance. His dream is to come to the United States, and he has the proof that he's going to do it. Please let him in. So that's one side of the argument. The other side of the argument was that there is actually a very sympathetic story to their case. The mother had to take care of the family, couldn't live in the U.S. anymore, but the mother is really responsible, raised this amazing child, and raised another child, his older brother. And that older brother actually already became a U.S. citizen. And so this mother, who's super hardworking, just couldn't live in the U.S. because of her personal needs, but was able to raise 2 outstanding individuals to benefit the United States. So even though the mother abandoned the green card, couldn't come back, but her legacy kind of lives on. It was a great story. We put that together, sent it in. Now, the second prong of the story is that the United States is his home. He never had intended to abandon it. Well, he's 9 years old. What kind of intent can he really have? But the way the family was able to help this 9-year-old child prepare for his future, that's the evidence that we used. So what do we use? The brother's a U.S. citizen, naturalized, came to the U.S., has a company, has a house, has property, has mortgages. The mother still has property and mortgages and pays taxes and has a job, is a startup. And there's all these things that they prepared so that when the younger brother comes to the U.S., there's financial support, there's financial support for the college, they're set up for success, essentially, right? He's not alone, an orphan coming to the U.S. to make it on his own. The family did everything for the past 10 years to make sure that they can succeed. The only person holding this kid's dream and future back is now this justice officer. The mother did everything she could. The brother did everything that he could. And this child did everything that he could, studied super hard to excel. And now his future is right here at this one moment decision of this officer. Will he allow this child in as a permanent resident? What do you say? The officer reviewed everything, approved it, came in. Now, that was fun. That was really fun. That was a fun case that we got to work on. We prepared the case for several months. I went down, talked to the officer, explained the situation. They said, okay, please let them come. We'll interview them. I pressed the family, please bring the United States citizen brother. Like half the case depends on him, right? So the brother flew down. We met in Mexico. The brother, the older brother, the younger brother, myself and Margaret, I believe, we met together at the lobby. We talked about the strategy. And it was so funny because the older brother was like just yelling at the younger brother half the time. It's like, you need to prepare, you need to do this. If you don't answer correctly, I'm gonna kick your butt. You know, like the older brother was just like super hard on the younger brother. I'm like, oh geez, chill out, right? But this younger brother, tall, handsome, but still a kid, 19 years old, couldn't answer everything correctly. So I practiced it, the questions a few times, and it got better. But it's okay. He's 19. You don't expect him to talk like a 30 or 40-year-old, right? So and he's a computer science major or something like that, right? So he's not supposed to like be all eloquent like a humanity major person. I don't know. I'm just saying, humanities people generally a little bit more eloquent.
What are some of the practice questions you asked with him?
Well, it would really centered on the key questions I was asking him was, where's your home, right? What school did you go to? Why did you leave the U.S. for 10 years? Where's your mom, right? Why didn't your mom come back? Where's your brother? Basic questions, nothing hard. I mean, these CBP officers, again, they do this day in and day out. They see they see 50,000 people a day, so it's crazy. So they're asking basic questions, nothing too difficult. But if you're lying, they can sense it. That's what they're trained to do, right? So be authentic, be real, be raw, and explain your case in a very sympathetic way. Don't fumble with your words, right? This is a very important moment for you. I mean, your entire life depends on it. Practice a little, yeah. So that's what we did. We practiced for maybe 30 minutes. We got in the car. We got in line. We showed up in front of the CBP officer. The brothers, myself, explained it to the officer, reviewed the case. They said, yes, welcome in, welcome home. And we came in, and it was just unbelievable. They're super happy. And then they flew to New York and started school. And so they're really set. Now, that was plan A. Plan B was, sorry, cannot. I will take away your green card. We will defer you in, but you can still go to school. That was always plan B, right? Because I set the tone. You've been out for 10 years, that's a long time. They might take away your green card, defer you in, and you might have to go to school for a year, 2 years, and then show an immigration judge that you really do plan on living here and that you are really crime-free, right? But luckily we didn't have to do that. These officers are good people. They understand. And so all the preparation worked. Kathy's team did the majority of the case, so she did amazing. And it was built on the experience that, Andy and so many other people, Amy, Grace, have done, because we helped so many other kids who are in similar situations. able to come back. So very happy about this story. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Take care. Bye-bye. Now Galen's going to edit it, make it into a good success story. Yeah, and then okay, and then we're gonna kind of close out today's live session. I don't know how I did, but hopefully you guys found it fun. But I'm here to answer any questions. So any questions that you guys have?
Okay, first one, and this is just for me. Is there such a thing as too polished on these CBP interviews? Or like too practiced?
Yes, but it's in a very cringy way. So can your delivery be off-putting, right? Can your delivery be so polished that it feels wrong? Obviously, right? If the officer asks you, what's your name? And you start saying, what is a name, right? You start going Shakespearean, that looks off. So, yes, you could totally be too polished, but like I said, be authentic, right? Know what you have to say it, your smile, your confidence, all that is what they're kind of gleaning for. But yeah, if they ask you one question and you give like a 5-paragraph answer, the officer's just gonna be looking at you and be like, you totally rehearsed this, I don't believe anything you say, and I'm gonna inspect you some more. So obviously, so that's just common sense.
So yeah, feel free to ask any questions in the chat, guys. But from our YouTube, I have one.
Yeah.
I want to take a cruise. I'm a lawful permanent resident with a valid green card. Do I need to file an I-131A carrier documentation to travel outside of the U.S.? I don't have a valid passport for my country of origin.
Wow, you don't have a passport, so you might be stateless. But yes, if you apply for either an advanced parole or reentry permit, then when you're coming back, because when you're going on a cruise, you're actually leaving the United States, right? Let's say you stop at Mexico, let's say you stop at, in Asia, and then you come back. Well, technically you've departed and now you're being re-entered. And when you're re-entering at a port of entry, you need documents to present yourself. Now, if you don't have it, like let's say you got mugged overseas, right? And you lost everything. That's possible. You don't have a valid entry document into the United States, the CBP officers technically can give you an I-193 waiver if you are a lawful permanent resident. If you're not a lawful permanent resident, if you're a non-immigrant, they could do an I-192 waiver to waive your visa to enter the country. But again, police report, you need to prove, why you don't have the document. You have to pay a fine, like around $700, right? But you need a valid document to enter the country. If you don't have a passport, you don't have a visa, those are entry documents. But if you have a green card, if you have an advanced parole, if you have a reentry permit, those are also entry documents. You know what else is entry document? A birth certificate, right? So if you have a birth certificate, that technically counts as a valid form of document to let you into the country. But obviously, every CBP officer has their own discretion to adjudicate to see if that alone is sufficient or they need something else as well. So there you go.
So should she apply for a boarding foil, I-131A, or the reentry permit, just I-131?
If you are a lawful permanent resident, you can apply for a reentry permit.
Got it. Another one from YouTube.
Yep.
Can I apply for an EB2 NIW as an electrician or a project manager in that kind of field, or do I need to go back to college and complete further education?
Great question. You do not. EB2 NIW, you first have to master, you have to prove that you fulfill the requirements to have an advanced degree or extraordinary. There's different ways to go about proving that, right? And so based on your length of experience, that also counts towards your college or master's education. So your work experience counts as well. So if you've been working for 20 years, you are the best in your industry, you're probably better than some kid who just graduated college, right? So the United States takes that into consideration. Now, they can't give it freely to everybody, so they have this archaic formula, but you do not strictly have to necessarily go back to school. It could be a shortcut, right? If it's easy to do an online school, 3 years, 4 years, and you could get a master's degree or something like that, and then you can add your work experience on top of that, that's definitely great. But there's different ways to prove you're extraordinary, qualifying you to do the national interest waiver, even if you didn't go to college or grad school.
What do you think about EB2 NIW for electricians?
Yeah, so the first part of my answer applied more about your education, fundamental requirement of meaning you have an advanced degree or you're extraordinary. But the second part, getting the national interest waiver, that is a different story. Now, for electricians or for any job category, as long as you can prove that you're really important, the United States really needs you, and the local economy really needs you, then you can qualify. So how do you go about doing that? For electricians, that's a little bit easier compared to something else, right? Because we have a shortage of handymen in the United States and every single demographic, and especially if you can specialize in something specific that is greatly lenient, that nobody does or very few people do, and no matter how many times you post, that's a great need, and you can prove that you have a business plan, that you can execute it, and it will solve the United States need, then the NIW could get approved, and you can cut in line and get your green card faster. So doesn't matter if you're blue collar, white collar, if you're electrician or you're not electrician, as long as you can prove that in your industry, in your demographic, you have a plan to solve a major need of the United States, you can qualify, right? So there are things that's in your favor, right? So similar to electricians, accountants, nurses, these are things that you see news, teachers even, we see news all the time that there's a huge shortage of these professionals. And so if you're in that professional, if you have the license, if you have the experience, and you have a specialty, that increases the chance of you succeeding the NIW just that much.
Another question on EB2, do I need to validate my transcript of record?
Assuming you got your degree overseas. If you got your degree overseas, you do need a credential evaluation. But if you got your, bachelor's degree or master's degree or PhD in the United States, you don't need that. You can just get your transcript from your university. Yeah, but if you got it overseas, you definitely want to get that. Yeah, because how does the USCIS officer know? Does that college actually exist? What did you study there? And what did you study there? Does that equal to the United States? U.S. education is really expensive. Did you just take a shortcut and go outside and get some cheap education and suddenly you're on same standing as the U.S., right? It's not fair to say no other education counts other than U.S. education. But it's also not fair to say any education is equal to the U.S. education, right? You see that? So very important to kind of understand the difference, but totally doable.
Another question from YouTube. Is it still safe to travel on advanced parole? And when do you think DACA is going to go in front of the Supreme Court? Oh, this is advanced parole.
Right. Advanced. This week, we just got another advanced parole approved. They're leaving, and they're going to come back, and we are confident that they're going to come back. So I'm just sharing at this timestamp, right? It's March 2025. Advanced paroles are still getting approved for DACA recipients, and we are still sending them out and coming back and then applying for green card right afterwards. So, obviously they have a certain background. That's why they can apply for green card. But to your question, advanced paroles are still in process. So definitely still apply. No harm if it gets denied. But right now we're still seeing its success, able to be approved. When is DACA going to go before Supreme Court? I don't know, maybe this year. It's always in the news, right? It's really up to, it's not so much DACA that's really going to go into Supreme Court, in my opinion, because it's an executive order. They can always cancel it and whatnot. It's more so if Congress wants to do something and cancel it or change a certain aspect of DACA, then that is much more interesting. And that's probably what will go to Supreme Court.
Another question from YouTube. My SEVIS ID got terminated. I assume F1.
Yes.
More than 1 year ago.
Yes.
I got a new I-20.
Yes.
What should I do?
You've been unlawfully here for 1 year already, so I would not recommend leaving the United States, going to the consulate or the CBP. I think both places will probably deny you. The question, I just want to repeat it, is if SEVIS was denied for over a year, and then now you got a new I-20, what should you do? The only pathway left, in my opinion, right now, is to do a reinstatement and ask a USCIS officer to reinstate you so as if you didn't get denied, kind of like pulling the plug and pushing it back in type idea. so you can restart your SEVIS. It's really hard to do. You have to explain why this happened to you after you fill out a status for over 5 months. I've seen USCIS be even strict on this issue, even if you fill out a status for less than 1 month, but now you're talking about a whole year. Yet, I have also seen cases where, they've been out of status for 2-3 years and they still got reinstated, right? So don't lose hope. It's possible. Do your best. File the reinstatement. But I don't recommend the consulate and I don't recommend CBP.
And this is not legal advice,
yes.
Right? It's just legal information.
It is legal information. It is not legal advice. Definitely, I need to know your situation to give you direct input. But just generally speaking, if you've filled out a status for over a year, definitely harder.
Another question from YouTube. What does it mean, I track my perm processing, it says analyst review?
That means somebody, somewhere, is probably going to review your case potentially today or tomorrow, but not necessarily right now, okay? So do not assume there is an actual official reviewing your case. That applies to all immigrant cases, right? If it's administrative processing, it does not mean somebody's like digging through your past, investigating you. It just means you've moved up in the system and now something happened. That's all that means.
Okay. Question from YouTube again on mandamus action.
Okay.
We've been stuck in DS55 for 7 months. When should I file the mandamus?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about like 7 years, yeah, right? But just generally speaking, just so you know, if you file a mandamus action, you need to be prepared that it will stay in the courts for at least 9 months. So if you've waited 7 months and now you file mandamus to wait 9 months, before you force them to make an action, is it really worth it? You know what I'm saying? So, but there are people who filed for citizenship and they've been doing background investigation for 2, 3, 4 years when processing time should be 4 months and there's no end in sight. Mandamus having a deadline of 6 to 9 months might be a good idea. And sometimes when you file mandamus within 2 months, they give you a result, right? And so the pros and cons are worth it.
So yeah, when would you say, like how much time would need to pass before?
I think that's up to every individual, like what are the costs to you, right? So we filed a bunch of mandamus actions a couple years ago because people's work permits and travel permits were not being issued and people were waiting for like 1.5 years to 2 years when it should be done in 4 months. So people cannot work, people cannot travel, people cannot live. Their human liberty is being taken away literally because of the slow processing of USCIS. Then we filed it and within 1 or 2 months, most of them within 1 month, every case got approved, right? So if your situation is extremely dire and on the grand scheme of things, USCIS is just dragging their feet on everyone and you want to jump the gun, then it's worth it. But if it's like, it's a nice to have, waiting an extra few months doesn't make a difference, maybe not do the mandamus, especially when it's not even really ripe for a cause of action. Yeah.
I see. How long do you think N400 RFVs normally take to get processed? They say their case has already been processed for 8 months and I submitted the RFE 20 days ago. Oh,
request for evidence, you should expect a response, either approval or denial, within about a month after you submitted it.
Okay.
A month to 3 months, but most of the time we see a month.
Okay. Well, maybe they've heard back.
Already.
It has been 10 days.
So. Right. So almost time. Well, hopefully everybody found this segment interesting and useful. I'm just doing it for the very first time. I'm practicing, I'm learning, I will improve, I will be better. Please, if you have any suggestions on how I can improve or what you would like to see in these live recordings, please let me know. We're going to try it for a whole year. And then if it sucks, then I'll cancel it, right? But the idea is really, I'm making these success stories anyways. We always have such a fun time when we make the success story. So might as well make it into a live session and answer any questions, since we're doing it already, right? And so anyways, every week we're going to be here. We're going to try and we're going to push through. Let us know what you want to see. I mean, who are we doing it for? We're doing it for you, right? I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for you. So take care. See ya. Bye-bye.